On the 8th of May, 1920, 20 chess masters gathered in Paris, confident in their abilities, completely unprepared for what was about to happen. An 8-year-old boy named Samuel Reshevsky sat across from them, and within hours, he had defeated nearly all of them in simultaneous play. The chess world stood still. How could a child barely tall enough to see over the board dismantle experienced players with such ease? This wasn't luck or a publicity stunt. This was pure genius at work, and it marked the beginning of one of the most fascinating careers in chess history. The 1920 Paris exhibition wasn't just impressive, it was borderline unbelievable. 20 seasoned chess players, men who had spent years studying the game, sat ready to face what they assumed would be a curious spectacle. A child prodigy? Sure, interesting to watch, but surely no real threat. Their smiles faded fast. Reshevsky moved from board to board with quiet confidence, his small hands placing pieces with precision that betrayed years of experience he shouldn't have had at his age. The veterans watched their carefully constructed plans crumble. One by one, they fell. The boy didn't gloat, didn't celebrate. He simply moved to the next board. This wasn't his first rodeo. Earlier that year, at just 8 years old, Reshevsky had arrived in New York City from Poland with his family. Within months, he was performing exhibitions across America. At the military academy at West Point, he faced 20 officers and cadets simultaneously. He won 19 games and drew 1. The military men, trained in strategy and tactical thinking, couldn't match the mind of a third grader. In San Francisco, he played 12 opponents at once, winning 11 and drawing 1, all in 2.5 hours. Over 600 spectators watched, cameras flashing constantly, which apparently upset young Samuel greatly. His parents and manager had to calm him down between moves. The numbers from his early tour are staggering. Between ages 8 and 10, Reshevsky played over 1,500 games in simultaneous exhibitions across the United States. He lost only 8. 8 losses out of 1,500 games, against adults, against experienced club players and local champions. In Los Angeles, he met Charlie Chaplin on a movie set, and later that same evening played 20 people at an athletic club, winning 14 and drawing 6. Over 300 spectators watched, including Chaplin himself and 5-year-old Jackie Coogan. The exhibition lasted past 11 at night, but the boy showed no signs of exhaustion. Perhaps most impressive was his blindfolded play. On the 4th of July, 1921, Reshevsky played 2 simultaneous games without seeing the board, holding the positions entirely in his mind. He won both games. Professional chess players struggle with blindfold chess. This was a 9-year-old doing it for fun. Samuel Reshevsky was born on November 26, 1911, in Ozorka, Poland, though some sources claim 1909 or 1910. The Chess World of Fame lists 1911, and in an interview with Hannon Russell, Reshevsky himself confirmed this as accurate. His family was simple, working-class Jewish folks. His father, Jacob, worked hard to provide for his wife Felicia and their several children. Nothing about the family suggested they would produce one of the greatest chess minds of the century, but at age 4, something clicked. Young Samuel watched his father play chess alone at home, moving pieces through various positions and problems. The boy didn't ask questions. He just watched, absorbing the patterns, the relationships between pieces, the geometry of the board. Then one day, his father made what Samuel perceived as a weak move. The 4-year-old walked over and changed it to a winning one. Jacob Reshevsky stared at his son. How did he know that? The boy had never played a game, never received a single lesson. He had simply watched and understood. They started playing together. Samuel didn't just learn quickly, he absorbed chess like breathing. Within months, he was beating his father consistently. By age 6, he had defeated every local player willing to sit across from him. The family realized they had something extraordinary on their hands. This wasn't just a smart kid who liked chess. This was a once-in-a-generation talent, perhaps once in a lifetime. They had to nurture it, but how? They lived in a small Polish town with limited resources and few strong players. The answer came when the family moved to Łódź, a larger city with a proper chess scene. There, Samuel caught the attention of Georg Salwe, one of Poland's strongest chess masters. Salway had competed internationally, understood high-level play, and recognized immediately that this child was different. He began working with Reshevsky, refining the raw talent into something more structured. Under Salway's guidance, Samuel's intuitive understanding gained theoretical backing. He learned opening principles, studied the games of champions like Emmanuel Lasker and Jose Raul Capablanca, and developed the positional style that would define his career. The question that puzzled everyone then, and still fascinates us now, is simple. How? How does a 4-year-old develop such understanding? Are prodigies born or made? The answer, frustratingly, seems to be both. Modern research in genetics and neuroscience shows that prodigies often possess unique cognitive traits: superior working memory, exceptional pattern recognition, and ability to focus intensely on one specific domain. These traits appear to have genetic components, suggesting some people are simply wired differently from birth. But genes alone don't create a prodigy. The environment matters enormously. Reshevsky was born into a family that valued intellectual pursuits, with a father who played chess and unknowingly provided the perfect learning environment for a young mind predisposed to spatial and strategic thinking. If Samuel had been born to different parents, or in a culture where chess didn't exist, his unique cognitive gifts might have manifested differently or not at all. The role of early exposure can't be overstated. Mozart had a father who was a professional musician and started training him before age 4. Tiger Woods had a father who put a golf club in his hands before he could walk. Reshevsky watched chess at the exact moment his developing brain was most receptive. The patterns embedded themselves at a fundamental level, becoming almost instinctual. By the time he was consciously learning the game, he already understood it in ways most players never would. Jacob Reshevsky deserves significant credit here. He didn't force chess on his son, but once he recognized Samuel's interest and ability, he supported it completely. The family made sacrifices, moved cities, eventually immigrated to America, all to give Samuel opportunities to develop his talent. Without that support system, without parents who believed in him and structured their lives around his gift, Reshevsky's story might have been very different. There's also something to be said for obsession. Prodigies don't just have talent, they have focus that borders on compulsion. Young Samuel didn't play chess because he had to. He played because he loved it, because the patterns and combinations fascinated him in ways nothing else did. That internal drive, combined with natural ability and environmental support, created something remarkable. When the Reshevsky family arrived in New York in November 1920, America was ready for them. The country was emerging from World War I, entering the roaring 20s, hungry for entertainment and spectacle. An 8-year-old chess genius fit the bill perfectly. Newspapers ate it up. Within months of arrival, Samuel was touring the country, giving exhibitions that packed venues and generated headlines from coast to coast. The West Point exhibition in 1920 set the tone. 20 military officers and cadets, men trained in strategic thinking, sat down expecting to humor a talented child. Instead, they got demolished. 19 losses, 1 draw. The military academy had hosted many chess exhibitions before, but nothing like this. Word spread quickly through chess circles and mainstream media alike. This wasn't just good for a kid, this was world-class play. San Francisco welcomed him in June 1921. At the Emporium's assembly room, over 600 people crowded in to watch him play 12 opponents simultaneously. He won 11, drew 1 against Arthur B. Stammer, lost none. The exhibition lasted 2 hours and 35 minutes. Among the spectators were newspaper reporters, photographers, and curious citizens who had read about the boy wonder and came to see if the hype was real. The photographers particularly bothered Samuel. The constant flashbulbs upset him, breaking his concentration. His parents and manager Charles Eisenberg had to intervene multiple times to calm him down. Even at 9 years old, he took the game seriously. This wasn't a show to him. This was chess. A few days later, still in San Francisco, he played 10 people at the Hotel St. Francis Italian Room. He won all 10 games in 90 minutes. The Jewish community of San Francisco sponsored the event, proud to support one of their own. Over 200 spectators watched, and newspapers devoted entire columns to describing the boy's technique, his calm demeanor, the way he crushed opponents who had decades more experience. Then came Los Angeles. Before his exhibition, the family visited movie studios because what else do you do when you're 9 and famous? Samuel met Charlie Chaplin on the set of The Kid and Douglas Fairbanks Sr. on the set of The Mark of Zorro. Pictures were taken, hands were shaken. That same evening, at 11 p.m., he played 20 people at the Los Angeles Athletic Club. Charlie Chaplin and 5-year-old Jackie Coogan sat in the audience of over 300 spectators. Reshevsky won 14 games and drew 6, including draws against Harry Borocho and several other strong local players. The event lasted hours, but Samuel never flagged. His concentration remained absolute. The blindfold games came next. On July 4, 1921, Reshevsky agreed to play 2 games simultaneously without looking at the boards. Blindfold chess requires holding the entire position in your head, tracking every piece, calculating variations without visual reference. Professional grandmasters practice for years to develop this skill. Samuel was 9. He played Harry Borochow in both games and won both convincingly. The chess community struggled to explain it. How does a child's mind hold such complexity? Where does that ability come from? In 1922, still only 10 or 11 years old, Reshevsky competed in a tournament of masters in New York. His opponents included Ossip Bernstein, Edward Lasker, and David Janowski, all respected international players. Reshevsky's victory over Janowski, a former world championship contender, made headlines. This wasn't simultaneous exhibition play against local club members anymore. This was serious tournament chess against legitimate masters, and the kid was winning. The tour statistics are almost absurd. Over 1,500 games played between ages 8 and 10, only 8 losses. Exhibitions in Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, dozens of smaller cities. Everywhere he went, crowds gathered. Newspapers in Paris, where he played before coming to America, called him a phenomenon. Le Figaro, Excelsior, L'Éclair Parisien, L'Illustration, all devoted coverage to the small Polish boy defeating French chess veterans. The New York Times described how he moved quietly from one board to another, reducing their most skillful plans and wins to nothingness. His head was well-shaped but not abnormal, they helpfully noted, as if people expected a physical explanation for his genius. But behind the headlines and the crowds, something else was happening. Samuel Reshevsky wasn't having a childhood. By all accounts, Samuel's early years should have been spent playing with other children, going to school, developing social skills and interests beyond chess. Instead, he spent them traveling from city to city, performing for crowds, bearing the weight of expectations from adults who saw him as a curiosity or a commodity. The exhibitions funded the family's life in America, but at what cost? He received no formal education. While other children learned to read and write and do arithmetic, Samuel studied chess positions and gave interviews to journalists. He played, he traveled, he performed. The cycle repeated endlessly. His parents, particularly his father Jacob, managed his schedule and finances. They meant well, probably believed they were supporting their son's extraordinary gift. But intention doesn't erase consequences. The situation reached a breaking point when Manhattan Children's Court brought charges against Jacob and Felicia Reshevsky for improper guardianship. The court argued that the parents prioritized Samuel's chess career at the expense of his education and well-being. At age 10 or 11, Samuel reportedly couldn't distinguish an elephant from a monkey in picture books. He had never seen picture books. His arithmetic skills were abysmal, far below what would be expected for his age. Yet, this same child could solve complex chess puzzles that baffled college students. The case highlighted the ethical gray area of child prodigies. Was it exploitation to let Samuel play chess professionally, or was it support of his natural gifts? If a child loves something and excels at it, do parents have an obligation to foster that talent, even at the expense of traditional education? The court didn't know. The public didn't know. Even looking back now, the answers aren't clear. Julius Rosenwald entered the picture at this crucial moment. Rosenwald, the wealthy co-owner of Sears Roebuck & Company, had a history of philanthropy and took an interest in young Reshevsky's case. He offered to become Samuel's benefactor with one non-negotiable condition: the boy must complete his education. Rosenwald guaranteed Samuel's financial future, but only if he stepped away from chess exhibitions and attended school like a normal child. The Reshevsky family agreed. They hired private tutors initially, then enrolled Samuel in regular school. At age 12, Samuel Reshevsky became a student for the first time. The adjustment was brutal. He was years behind his peers academically, despite being far ahead intellectually in certain domains. He had to learn basic subjects from scratch while other kids his age were well into their education. The scrutiny didn't help. Everyone knew who he was, the famous chess prodigy now sitting in a classroom struggling with elementary material. In his 1948 memoir, Reshevsky on Chess, Samuel reflected on these years with mixed feelings. He acknowledged the overwhelming media attention, the public expectations, the constant pressure of exhibitions and tournaments during his young age, but he also expressed genuine love for the game. He never blamed chess itself, only the circumstances surrounding it. "I never thought of myself as a wonder child," he wrote. "I was just playing a game I loved and I happened to be good at it." The exhibitions had taken their toll in other ways too. He never learned to just be a kid, to play without purpose, to do nothing productively. Every moment had been scheduled, every action designed to serve chess or publicity. Even years later, as an adult, Reshevsky struggled with spontaneity and relaxation. The chess-playing accountant, who maintained a day job while competing internationally, perhaps never fully escaped the structure imposed on his childhood. His parents faced criticism for years. Were they stage parents, exploiting their son's gift? Or were they immigrants doing their best to provide for their family, using the one extraordinary asset they had? The truth probably lies somewhere between those extremes, complicated and human and impossible to judge fairly from the outside. The long road back. Samuel Reshevsky disappeared from competitive chess for years. From roughly 1922 to 1927, he was a student first and a chess player second. He attended school, caught up academically, worked on subjects that had nothing to do with rooks and pawns. The chess world wondered if they'd seen the last of the prodigy. Child wonders often burn out, their gifts fading as they grow older, or their interest waning under the pressure. Would Reshevsky become another cautionary tale? Then in 1927, during a school vacation, 16-year-old Samuel entered the Pacific Coast Championship. He won convincingly, defeating experienced adult players with the same calm precision he'd shown as a child. The years away hadn't dulled his ability. If anything, he played better. His understanding had deepened, matured. The raw talent was now supported by patience and psychological maturity. Reshevsky was back. He enrolled at the University of Chicago in 1929 to study accounting. The choice raised eyebrows. Why accounting? Why not pursue chess full-time? But Reshevsky was adamant. He wanted a profession, a normal career, something beyond chess. Maybe the childhood exhibitions had taught him the danger of relying on one thing entirely. Maybe he genuinely loved numbers and structured thinking. Probably both. He graduated and became a practicing accountant, taking a day job like any other professional. He supported his family with his accounting income, playing chess on the side, entering tournaments when his schedule allowed. To the outside world, it seemed backwards. Here was one of the greatest chess talents in history, and he was working as a corporate accountant, treating chess as a hobby. The Washington Times later referred to him as the greatest accountant in chess history, a description that was both compliment and confusion. But the arrangement worked for him. Chess remained something he loved rather than something he had to do. Without the pressure of needing chess for survival, he played more freely, more enjoyably, and he kept winning. By the mid-1930s, Reshevsky was dominating American chess again, racking up tournament victories and establishing himself as one of the world's elite players. 8-time champion, never world champion. The next several decades saw Samuel Reshevsky at the absolute peak of chess ability. He won the U.S. Open in 1931, tied for the same title with Reuben Fine in 1934, and won Margate in 1935, finishing ahead of the legendary José Raúl Capablanca. That Margate victory announced to the world that Reshevsky wasn't just an American champion, he was a legitimate contender on the global stage. From 1936 onwards, Reshevsky dominated American chess in a way few players ever have. He won the U.S. Chess Championship 8 times, 1936, 1938, 1940, 1941, 1942, then a Triple Crown from 1943 to 1946, then again in 1969 and 1972. 8 titles spanning nearly 4 decades. For comparison, Bobby Fischer won it 8 times too, but in consecutive years, not spread across multiple generations. Reshevsky's longevity was extraordinary. He defeated 7 world champions during his career. Emmanuel Lasker, José Raúl Capablanca, Alexander Alekhine, Max Euwe, Mikhail Botvinnik, Vasily Smyslov, and Bobby Fischer. He was the only player ever to accomplish this feat, facing 11 of the first 12 world champions from Lasker to Anatoly Karpov. His record against elite competition was consistently strong. Against most of his American rivals, including Isaac Cashton and William Lombardy, he maintained positive scores throughout his career. The 1953 Zurich Candidates Tournament represented perhaps his best shot at the World Championship. The tournament assembled the world's strongest players to determine who would challenge Mikhail Botvinnik for the title. Reshevsky performed admirably, competing toe-to-toe with the Soviet powerhouses who dominated the era. He didn't win the tournament, but his performance cemented his reputation as one of the absolute best. Many observers felt that with a bit more luck, a few draws going his way, he could have won. So why didn't he ever become world champion? The question haunted Reshevsky and puzzles historians to this day. He had the talent, clearly. He had the results, defeating world champions regularly. He had the longevity, remaining competitive from the 1930s through the 1970s. What was missing? Part of it was his playing style. Reshevsky was a positional player, patient and methodical. He built small advantages, ground down opponents, converted tiny edges in the endgame. Rival grandmaster Larry Evans once described Reshevsky's style as penny-pinching chess, a reference to his accounting background and careful, conservative approach. He rarely took bold risks or launched spectacular attacks. His games were often technically brilliant, but lacked the fire and aggression that characterized world champions like Alekhine or later Fischer. Then there was the time trouble. Reshevsky had a bizarre habit of spending enormous amounts of time in the opening, sometimes deliberating for 30 minutes on moves that were well-known theory. This left him with very little time for the crucial middle game and end game. He would then blitz out moves, playing the final 20 moves in 5 minutes, creating a chaotic situation that sometimes confused opponents, but more often led to errors. He acknowledged this flaw himself in his writings. The problem wasn't inability to calculate quickly. He could do that fine. The problem was his perfectionistic approach to the opening. He wanted to find the absolute best move, to understand every nuance before committing. By the time he reached the middle game, he'd used an hour on 8 moves and had to rush the rest. For a player of his caliber, it was a maddening weakness. His day job as an accountant also limited his preparation time compared to professional players, especially the Soviets who had state support and could focus on chess full-time. Reshevsky balanced tournament play with work obligations, which meant less time studying openings, analyzing opponents, preparing novelties. He made it work remarkably well, but it was still a disadvantage against players who could devote 12 hours a day to chess. And then there was faith. The Fischer Wars, if Reshevsky had a chess nemesis, it was Bobby Fischer. The rivalry between them defined American chess for 2 decades and produced some of the most dramatic moments in the game's history. When Fischer debuted in the 1957-58 U.S. Championship at just 14 years old, he immediately became a force. By the next year, he was dominating, eventually winning 8 consecutive U.S. championships and pushing Reshevsky, the 7-time former champion, back into the chasing pack. The tension between them wasn't just competitive, it was personal. Fischer represented the new generation, brash and confident, dismissive of the old guard. Reshevsky represented tradition, experience, and a measured approach to the game. They clashed not just over the board, but in personality and philosophy. Ahead of the 1960 Buenos Aires tournament, Reshevsky made a comment that revealed the strain. "I would settle for 19th place if Fischer placed 20th. It was petty, sure, but also very human. Here was a man who had been the best American player for decades, suddenly overshadowed by a teenager. Reshevsky won that Buenos Aires tournament with Fischer well back in the standings, the only time in international competition that Reshevsky finished ahead of Fischer after Bobby's rise. It was a small victory, but meaningful. In 1961, they agreed to a 16-game match staged jointly in New York and Los Angeles. Despite Fischer's recent meteoric rise, consensus opinion favored Reshevsky. He had the experience, the psychological edge, the proven record. The match was intense, both players at their absolute best. After 11 games, the score was tied, 2 wins each, 7 draws. Both players were exhausted, the matches brutal and uncompromising. Then it fell apart due to a scheduling dispute between Fischer and match organizer Jacqueline Piatigorsky. The match ended incomplete, and Reshevsky received the winner's share of the prize fund, a hollow victory. The 1967 Sousse Interzonal provided the most infamous incident. Fischer arrived 53 minutes late to his game against Reshevsky, just 7 minutes shy of an automatic forfeit. He made his first move without apology. Reshevsky, who had been sitting at the board waiting and had apparently convinced himself that Fischer had withdrawn from the tournament, was completely thrown off. He played poorly and lost. Afterwards, he complained bitterly to the organizers about Fischer's gamesmanship. The argument was valid, but the loss stood. Despite this setback, Reshevsky advanced to the next round. Reshevsky's relationship with Fischer affected his participation in chess Olympiads. He declined to play for the U.S. team in 1960, 1962, and 1966 because Fischer, as U.S. champion, was selected for the top board. Reshevsky, with all his accomplishments and decades of excellence, refused to play second board to a player he viewed as talented but undisciplined. The pride was understandable, but it cost the team and cost Reshevsky himself opportunities to compete on the world stage. Only in 1970 did he finally agree to play on a lower board, the only time both he and Fischer appeared on the same team. It must have been awkward. Two men who barely tolerated each other having to cooperate for national representation. Yet underneath the rivalry was respect. Complicated and begrudging, but real. In interviews during the late 1960s, Fischer stated that Reshevsky had been the strongest player in the world during the mid-1950s, particularly around the time Reshevsky defeated Botvinnik in a 4-game mini-match on top board during the US versus USSR team match in Moscow. Coming from Fischer, famously stingy with compliments, this was extraordinary praise. Reshevsky, for his part, acknowledged Fischer's brilliance while criticizing his instability. In his memoir, he wrote that Fischer had the talent to be the greatest, but he lacked the stability necessary for long-term success. Time proved Reshevsky right. Fischer became world champion in 1972, but never defended his title, eventually disappearing into paranoia and obscurity. Reshevsky, meanwhile, kept playing into his 70s, a model of consistency and dedication. The Sabbath Sacrifice. Samuel Reshevsky's Orthodox Jewish faith shaped every aspect of his life, including his chess career. He strictly observed the Sabbath, refusing to play from Friday sunset to Saturday sunset. He also refused to play during Jewish religious festivals. In a field where tournament schedules are often inflexible, this created enormous problems. Tournament organizers would schedule important games on Saturdays, and Reshevsky would refuse to play, forfeiting the round or requesting special accommodation. Sometimes organizers agreed to move his games, sometimes they didn't. The scheduling conflicts cost him points, tournament victories, and possibly championship opportunities. Critics argued that if he wanted to be a professional chess player, he needed to adapt to professional chess schedules. But Reshevsky never wavered. His faith wasn't negotiable. In his memoir, he described his religious conviction as inextricably linked to his identity. The discipline and structure of Jewish observance provided strength in his life, both on and off the board. He credited his faith with allowing him to stay focused under pressure, to maintain psychological balance in high-stakes situations. The question arises, did his religious observance cost him the world championship? It's impossible to say definitively, but it certainly didn't help. Tournament structures at the highest level rarely accommodate individual scheduling needs. The Soviets, who dominated world chess from the 1940s through the 1980s, certainly wouldn't have agreed to reschedule matches for religious reasons. If Reshevsky had been willing to compromise his faith, would things have turned out differently? Maybe, but that's a hypothetical that misses the point. For Reshevsky, compromising his faith to win at chess would have been a net loss, not a gain. He saw no contradiction between being a serious chess player and a serious Jew. Both required dedication, study, discipline, and respect for tradition. Both offered pathways to excellence. If the chess world couldn't accommodate his religious practice, that was the chess world's problem, not his. Looking back, it's hard not to admire the consistency. In an era when many people compartmentalized their lives, Reshevsky integrated his. Chess didn't exist separately from his faith, his family, his work as an accountant. It was all one life, and he lived it according to principles that mattered to him. The final decades, Reshevsky continued competing at the highest levels well into his 60s and 70s, a testament to both his skill and his love for the game. In 1991, just 1 year before his death, he defeated his old rival Vasily Smyslov in a game. Smyslov was also in his 70s by then. Two legendary players from a different era, still sharp enough to produce high-quality chess. His writings during these later years focused on teaching. Chess with Reshevsky in 1951 targeted beginners and intermediate players, offering step-by-step guidance. How Chess Games Are Won in 1962 and Great Chess Upsets in 1976 analyzed critical moments in important games, showing readers how to think through complex positions. The Art of Positional Play in 1978 distilled a lifetime of experience into principles that anyone could apply. These books remain valuable today. They're not flashy or filled with computer analysis. They're written by a man who understood chess at a fundamental level, who had faced world champions across the board and knew what separated good players from great ones. His emphasis on solid positional play, patient maneuvering, and strong endgame technique reflects his own style but applies universally. He also wrote accounts of important matches, including the 1972 World Championship between Fischer and Boris Spassky. Watching his old rival finally capture the title must have been bittersweet. Fischer had achieved what Reshevsky never could, becoming world champion. But Fischer's tenure was brief and troubled, while Reshevsky remained active and respected for decades longer. In 1941, Reshevsky had married Norma Mindik. She was devoted to him, accompanying him to tournaments, managing practical aspects of his life so he could focus on chess. They had 3 children together, a son and 2 daughters. Unlike Samuel's own childhood, none of their children became competitive chess players. The family life was kept private, deliberately shielded from the spotlight that had defined Samuel's early years. Perhaps having experienced the costs of child prodigy fame firsthand, he and Norma decided to give their children something he'd never had, a normal childhood. On April 4, 1992, Samuel Reshevsky died of a heart attack in Suffern, New York. He was 81 years old. His passing marked the end of an era, closing a chapter that had begun 72 years earlier when an 8-year-old boy stunned Parisian chess masters. The chess world mourned. Tributes poured in from players across generations, from those who had competed against him in the 1940s to young grandmasters who knew him only through his games and writings. They all recognized what had been lost. Not just a great player, but a living connection to chess history. A man who had competed when Capablanca was still active and lived to see Garry Kasparov dominate. 8 decades of American chess history, 8 U.S. championships, victories over 7 world champions, thousands of games played across hundreds of tournaments, and yet never world champion himself. The paradox that defined his career remained unresolved at the end, both his greatest accomplishment and his biggest frustration. He was brilliant enough to beat anyone, but never quite captured the ultimate prize. Maybe the accounting job held him back. Maybe the time trouble cost crucial points. Maybe religious observance created insurmountable scheduling problems. Maybe his conservative style, as effective as it was, lacked the killer instinct needed to dominate a world championship match. Or maybe, in the end, being world champion just wasn't as important to Reshevsky as it was to others. He had a full life, a career he enjoyed, a family he loved, a faith that sustained him, and chess that challenged and delighted him for 8 decades. That 8-year-old boy in Paris, defeating 20 masters simultaneously, remains one of the most remarkable images in chess history. The genius was real, undeniable, preserved in the games he played and the books he wrote. Samuel Reshevsky may never have worn the world champion's crown, but he earned something else. A legacy of consistency, integrity, and devotion to the game that transcends any single title. The prodigy who dazzled the world became a man who served chess faithfully his entire life, and in the end, that might be the greater achievement.